Namaste, kia ora, and good day, friends. It's Yugal Parashar, editor of the Indian News. Friends, we have with us a very special guest in our studios. We have with us the man who could be the future Prime Minister of New Zealand, and he is National Party leader, Christopher Luxon. Welcome to the Indian News, Chris, and how are you this morning?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me along. It's great to be with you. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome. Now, Chris, we start with a question like from the corporate ladders to the political ladder. How has been this transition and the journey so far?
Well, look, I mean, the business world and the political world are different, and there's a different set of skills that you need to learn to be good at both, I think. But there are some things that are quite common. You know, when you've been a CEO, you set a vision, you define problems, you get solutions, you get results, and most importantly, you sort of do things through, with, and for people. And all of that part of it's actually very, very similar to what I do now in the political world. Of course, in politics, there's a whole bunch of new things to learn. You know, you really want to be very good in your electorate and a good retail politician. Sure. You need to be really good with the party, the political party, and understand the members and the supporters and what's concerning them. You need to understand Parliament and the protocols that go on there. And the fourth thing really is about policy. And so if you want to be a great MP or a great politician, you've really got to be able to master, I think, all four of those things well. So it's been, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, you know, and I'm really enjoying it. And now we've got a good fight on, and we've got a great chance to make our case to the New Zealand people, which is exciting.
Yeah, great. Now, if we go by the latest poll survey numbers, how do you see the prospects of your party? And has the National finally come over this leadership issue?
Yeah, look, I mean, we went through that at the end of last year in end of November, and, you know, we all came together as a group of 33, and we said, look, do we want to keep doing it the way we've been doing it the last few years, which is not very successful, not very effective, fighting with each other, or do you actually want to make it externally about the New Zealand people, and certainly about presenting an alternative to this current government? And so I think you've seen over the last 4 months that we actually are very unified as a team. We've got an outstanding bunch of MPs. I mean, there's 33 very, very talented people there. And it's realising that actually politics is about a team sport. It's not an individual sport. It shouldn't just be left to the job of the leader. Yeah. It's the combination of what you can create. And so by having people with their backgrounds and putting them on the right assignments, and where they've got real passion and where they've got real expertise, has been really important, because it just means that the public look at us and they go, okay, I can kind of see why, you know, Melissa Lee as a journalist is doing broadcasting. I've got Mark Mitchell, who's a police officer, long-serving police officer, being the Minister of Police. You've got Shane Retty, a medical doctor, doing health. And you go through it and you can see we're building a good team with, you know, a good focus. So, yeah, look, it's an encouraging sort of start, but we've got a lot of work to do, and really we've got two things. We have to oppose the government very strongly, be constructive where we can, but certainly we also need to propose ideas. It's not just good enough to criticise the government. You actually have to have the 3 to 5 things that you would do. And I also feel that when we get to government, the country will be quite run down and in need of some serious turnaround. And so I need all those 33 MPs understanding that when you get to be a minister on day one, you need to be moving at 100 kilometres an hour. It's not time to start to think about it. It's not time to go have a working group. Yeah. I want you to have your plan ready to go now. So there's a lot of work for us to do, but we're off to a good start. And, you know, as I travel the country and I go to 2 or 3 towns every week, you know, you can sense that people are saying, I'm a bit over this government. They've lost the way. It feels like we're playing a very small, inward, fearful, negative game. I want New Zealand to be more confident, aspirational, ambitious, forward-looking, and I think people are sensing that, you know, across the country, which is great.
Great. Now that prompts me to come to my next question, which you would love to answer, I believe. Is how do you rate the Labour government's fiscal management and the COVID management of past 2 years?
Well, look, I mean, I think on COVID first, they did a good job in 2020. They were a bit late, you know, closing the borders down under pressure from business people. But by and large, I think we have to say the Prime Minister and the government, I thought, did a good job in 2020. But 2021 and 2022 has been a total shambles, and it's been made up as they've gone along. And essentially what happened was the government got stuck in a 2020 mindset in 2022. Yeah. And so they didn't keep evolving their responses to the risks that we actually had. And it's a bit like at Air New Zealand, when you land an airplane on a wet runway, there's a whole bunch of different actions and measures that you take. And when it's a nice sunny, bright, sunny, hot day, it's a different set of measures and actions. And it's the same here. They assumed it was the same. But, you know, as we got to Omicron, Well, we obviously had vaccines that are working, we had rapid antigen tests, we have antivirals, we have a whole bunch of new tools that we didn't have 2 years ago, and so the risk can be managed in quite a different way. So as a consequence, they've been making it up along the way, which I think has been poor, and I think New Zealanders have got frustrated about that because they don't quite know where things are going. On the management of the economy, that is without doubt the thing that most New Zealanders are. We're going to get through Omicron and COVID shortly, as you're seeing. We're removing mandates, removing passes. Tourists are coming back. Kiwis can come home. It's all too little, too late, but it's happening. But the real issue is the cost of living crisis and inflation, which is a major, major issue. I mean, when wages are only going up 2.5%, inflation's up 6%, there's a real challenge here because people are going backwards. They're worse off than they were 12 months ago because their money doesn't buy as much as the cost of living's going up and prices are going up. So I think there's a couple of challenges. This government, I think, talks a lot and doesn't actually deliver. I think there's a lot of wasteful spending. I think there's a lot of focus on more centralise and control everything from Wellington. We won't work with community groups, we don't work with businesses, we make all the decisions. I think there's a big focus on identity politics, and fundamentally I don't think they have a lot of ambition for New Zealand, and that's a big problem.
Now, as you just said, lots of people now, since the doors are opening, lots of Kiwis are on the way to come back home. There are lots of migrants who are stuck overseas, whose issues have not been stuck. It was none of their fault if you declare, shut the doors here, and they're all stuck overseas. Their visas or their whatever status was their visa was, they're all expired. Now they're waiting for doors to open for them as well. What's your plan about it? What do you want to tell to those people who are stuck overseas?
Well, look, our view is very simple, is that this government's been anti-immigration even before they became the government. Yeah. And even before COVID, most people will forget, but I remember talking to many in the migrant community, but essentially a lot of visas had doubled from processing times from 50 days to 100 days. And so they were bad at running immigration before even COVID happened. And then when you shut the border down and everybody starts working from home and does no work for a year and a half, 2 years, there's been very little that's been done. And as a consequence, every single sector of this economy is actually short of workers. And so we are pro-immigration as a party. Yeah. You would have seen that with the work of Erica Stanford. I just put it to you, I think she'll make a much better Minister of Immigration than Chris Farfoy because she cares about the people, she understands the split family migrant situation. There is no pathway to residency available for people at the moment. And frankly, if we want to, there's a war for talent around the world. And if we want the best people to come to New Zealand, and we need doctors and nurses, and we need welders, and we need mechanics, and we need veterinarians and all sorts of people, you have to be the best. If you want the best, you have to be the best in terms of an immigration system, and we haven't been that. And so the reality is that people overseas are actually saying, I can't see much point in coming to New Zealand. It looks like it's closed for business, and they're voting with their feet and going to Canada, or they're going to Australia, sure. Who are actually desperately for those workers. So Erica's got a good plan about opening up the classes of visas and rapidly getting. There's many people who are already in New Zealand that we desperately need to be, a visa extended or have a pathway to residency and make that available to them. So, yeah, we think immigration is critical for our economic success. We have to bring in talent from around the world. Some of it's already here. It was back overseas. We've got to bring it back. And secondarily, we've got to keep working hard on education and building talent from within the country as well. And it's about buying talent in and building talent from within.
I'm sure, Chris, you would be aware about the kind of marriage system that prevails in that part of the world, the Indian subcontinent, irrespective of whether you come from a Hindu background or Muslim or Sikh or any other background. Immigration, New Zealand does not recognize that if someone who is a resident of New Zealand marries somebody in India, for example, and you have to prove your, that live-in thing first, which is not culturally appropriate. What's your take about it?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, that was an issue before COVID, if you remember as well. There was a major issue where there was a projection of a very Western definition of marriage or de facto relationships, and it wasn't culturally appropriate. I had originally thought that we had that issue, and you might remember, it was before COVID. It was probably early 2020, I think, or maybe even late 2019. Yeah. And I thought that had been fixed up, but clearly it hasn't been. And there's been a number of cases through the course of the last year that are like that. So we've got to be able to make sure that we can handle that. Other countries do that, and Canada does it well. Likewise with parental visas as well. There might be other things that we can do in that space that I know Eric has been entertaining as well. Now,
Chris, there is a general feeling within the Indian community especially, that the warmth between the two countries, between New Zealand and India, lacks. And there is a lack of trust as well between the two governments. So maybe that the fallout of that is the FTA, which has not been happening for last even 7 or 8 years deliberation. There's a direct flight issue which has been hanging for last few years now. So what's your take? And there were little efforts made during the regime of John Key, but nothing much has been done during this Labour government's regime. So what's your take about it?
Well, look, I mean, first and foremost, I'd say I know the potential of India because I've been there many, many times because of my Unilever background, and obviously Hindustan Lever was a big organisation there. So I know the immense talent that's in India. I've seen it get to the top of business all around the world, but it's a country we desperately want to have a relationship with, and we want to have a trading relationship with. It has been challenging because even in John Key's government, it's quite obvious the Indian government doesn't do free trade agreements with anybody, is kind of the takeaway. But that doesn't mean that we stop trying. It means that we should keep building the relationships, find ways in which we can start to do more trade and to do people-to-people connections. Our trade with India is quite small. You know, it's really small. It hasn't grown at all. But under this government, no one's been to India, no one's visited, no one's maintained relationships between trade ministers, I suspect. Whereas, you know, someone like Todd McClay, who was an outstanding trade minister, he was in constant dialogue on the phone, talking regularly with his counterparts all around the world. New Zealand is a small country, and we need to do trade with everyone around the world. And there's 7.8 billion people in 195 countries. Obviously, our biggest trading partner is China. It is the biggest trading partner for 150 countries on Earth. It's number 2 for the remaining 45. It's not number 1. But we would love to diversify our trade much more. And so it's a tale of you know, you tango at the speed that you both want to go. But I mean, we do need the Indian government to start to think about whether it wants to do a free trade agreement as well. But it definitely hasn't wanted to do so. It's got a big aversion for that for some reason. But even so, we can still build connectivity and trading links between us. And if we build the people-to-people connections, then the flow of capital and data and trade starts to happen once you've got those people connections. What I would say is, you know, for New Zealand, you know, the danger is for India is that all of a sudden we need to focus on Indonesia, and we've just signed this regional comprehensive economic partnership, a new trading agreement in Southeast Asia with Indonesia and the other Southeast Asian countries, and that needs to become a focus for our business people as well. But we want it to be India. It'd be great to be India, but we've just got to keep working the relationship, and there hasn't been enough work on trade in general from this government because everything's been so internally focused. And frankly, none of the politicians or the ministers have any background in international business, so they don't really know, I think, what they need to do.
I'll have a couple of last questions. There has been a spate of crimes in the recent months, especially among, against these migrant communities, dairies and all this, and mainly affected communities, the Indian community. Yes. What would you want to say to the government to make this situation better?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've followed that very closely. I'm in constant dialogue with Sunny and others that are leading that charge around, you know, what's been going on with crime. I am really concerned about law and order in this country. I think this government's gone very, very soft on it. I think when you actually give $2.5 million to a gang to do drug rehabilitation after they've hooked people up to the drugs and now they get money back to rehabilitate people from drugs, that doesn't make a lot of sense. We're seeing it very clearly. We've got 10,100 police officers. We tend to lose maybe anywhere up to 40 a month because they're pretty disillusioned, and yet the gang members are growing very, very quickly at 8,200. We've had massive growth in gangs in the last 4 years. And every week you see now more and more violent crime, which is up over 20%. And so you see gun crime, you've seen, you get 2 of these events. This never used to happen in New Zealand. Yeah. And so we need to be really tough on gangs, and we need to, that's why I've asked Mark Mitchell to lead sort of a lot of our law and order policy work with Paul Goldsmith and Justice. Because you're right. I mean, these people are doing, the dairy owners are doing everything right, and they're getting smashed up, and the police are now not even following up with great speed because they don't have the resources, because they've been asked to do something like manage an MIQ facility or hold a borderline through COVID or whatever it's been. So we need more frontline police officers. We need to give them more support, so that and they need to know they're backed from the government. Whereas at the moment, some of our police officers, they're told they can't do a car chase. There's a lot of we've got very, very soft on law and order. And it's not right, because New Zealand is a place built on rights and responsibilities. If you live by those rights, you've got certain responsibilities as well. And so when you hurt your fellow citizens, that's not on. Thank
you so much. Just one last question before I let you go. Do you still stand by with your sort of unsavory comments you said recently about the beneficiaries as a bottom feeding? Do you still stand by with your comment? What I'd say to you is I never said those comments with respect to beneficiaries whatsoever. So go back and look at the full quote. What I was actually talking about was the fact that in New Zealand we've got a challenge, which is that we are playing a very fearful, small, inward-looking game. And we're celebrating low achievement, and actually we should be celebrating ambition, aspiration, confidence, positivity, optimism, going out in the world and making things happen. So, that was a bunch of people who got on to that comment and projected that I was talking about beneficiaries. I definitely wasn't. Sure. But likewise, I'd say to you, if you've got rights and responsibilities in New Zealand as well, so if you get given a state house which is paid for by taxpayers, we expect you to pay your rent, we expect you not to trash the house, and we don't expect you to abuse your neighbours. That's not fair, and that's not on to the other tenants that are there as well. That brings to the end of our interview. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time. Appreciate it. And thanks once again for coming to the Indian News. Likewise. Thank you. Thank you.